Hi, friends. How are you doing today? I really hope that you guys are having the day that you deserve. My name's Carly Ramsey, and you are listening to the serial Zodiac. I am so excited that you were here today. And surprise, Candyman Part 2 came early. So I won't be releasing a episode next Thursday, but something is coming next Wednesday. So make sure to sign up for my email box thingy. Words are very hard right now. Email box thingy so that way you can be notified of when episodes drop, especially surprise episodes, because I know you guys weren't expecting an episode today. So, yeah. Anyway, like I always say, thank you so much for listening to my podcast. Truly appreciate it. But I do like to always get you guys right into the story. So, welcome back to Candyman Part 2. Thank you so much again for listening. Let's get started. Warning: this podcast episode contains explicit language, mature themes, and thought provoking content. Listener discretion is advised, and it's not suitable for minors or the faint of heart. While in custody, Elmer was questioned by the Pasadena Police Department about the killing of Dean Corll. He explained the events of the previous nights and that morning, stating he had shot Dean in self defense. Elmer's friends, Curley and Williams, confirmed his story, leading the detective to believe that Elmer had indeed acted in self defense. When Elmer was asked about his claim that Dean had threatened him and that he had shouted about killing several boys, he provided a detailed explanation. For nearly 3 years, Elmer and his accomplice, David Brooks, had been helping Dean procure boys, some of whom were their own friends. Elmer initially believed that the boys were being sold to a Dallas based organization. However, he soon learned that Dean was murdering the victims instead. Elmer admitted to assisting Dean in numerous abductions and murders, and he confessed to actively participating in the torture and mutilation of 6 to 8 victims before their deaths. The majority of the victims were buried in a boat shed in southwest Houston, while others were buried at Lake Sam Rayburn in High Island Beach. Elmer and David received up to $200 from Dean for each boy they delivered to him. At first, the police were skeptical of Elmer's claims. They believed the only homicide in the case was that of Dean, attributing it to a drug-fueled altercation that turned deadly. However, Elmer persisted and provided the names of 3 boys: Cobble, Hilgis, and Jones, whom he and David had lured for Dean. The police found this information credible, as all 3 boys were listed as missing by the police in Houston. Hilgist had been missing since the summer of 1971, while Cobble and Jones had been missing for only 2 weeks. Moreover, the crime scene corroborated Elmer's story. The floor of the room where the teenagers had been tied was covered in thick plastic sheeting. The police discovered a plywood torture board measuring 8 by 3 feet with handcuffs and nylon ropes at the corners. Additional items found at Dean's residence included a large hunting knife, rolls of clear plastic identical to the one covering the floor, a portable radio rigged to a pair of dry cells for increased volume, an electric motor with loose wires, 8 pairs of handcuffs, several dildos, thin glass tubes, and lengths of rope. The evidence extended to Dean's Ford Ecoline van parked in the driveway. The van's rear windows were sealed with opaque blue curtains. Inside, the police found a coil of rope, a beige rug covered in soil stains, and a wooden crate with air holes drilled in the sides. The pegboard walls of the van were filled with several rings and hooks, and another wooden crate with air holes was found in Dean's backyard, containing strands of human hair. Elmer agreed to assist police by leading them to Dean's boat shed in southwest Houston. Elmer claimed that this location contained the bodies of most of Dean's victims. Inside the boat shed, officers discovered a half dismantled stolen car, a child's bicycle, a large iron drum, water containers, 2 sacks of lime, and a large plastic bag fitted with boys' clothes. 2 prison trustees began digging through the soft, crushed shell earth of the boat shed. They soon uncovered the bodies of a blonde haired boy lying on his side, wrapped in clear plastic, and buried underneath a layer of lime. The police continued to dig through the shed's earth, uncovering the remains of more victims in various stages of decomposition. Most of the bodies were encased in thick, clear plastic sheeting. Some victims had been shot, while others had been strangled, with ligatures still tightly wrapped around their necks. The interior of Dean's rented boat shed, pictured just before the search began on August 8th, 1973, revealed more horrifying details. Cloth rags had been stuffed into the victims' mouths, and adhesive tape was wrapped around their faces to muffle their screams. The tongue of the first victim uncovered protruded over an inch beyond the teeth. The third victim, unearthed on August 8th, had his mouth so agape that all upper and lower teeth were visible, leading investigators to believe the youth died screaming. The search was halted for the night after the recovery of the 8th body from the boat shed at 11:55 p.m. and was resumed the next day. On the evening of August 8th, accompanied by his father, David Brooks went to the Houston Police Department headquarters. David gave a statement denying any knowledge of or participation in the murders. However, he admitted knowing that Dean had killed 2 teenagers in 1970. Dean also named 2 youth, Reuben Haney and Mark Scott, whom he had seen with Dean just before their disappearances. On the morning of August 9th, Elmer provided a detailed written statement outlining his and David's involvement with Dean in the abduction and murder of numerous boys. Elmer admitted to personally killing about 9 boys and assisting Dean in the strangulation of others. He mentioned that David had not been involved in only 3 abductions and murders. which were committed in the summer of 1973. Later that day, Elmer led police to the Lake Sam Rayburn, where he, David, and Dean had buried 4 victims earlier that year. 2 additional bodies were found in shallow, lime-soaked graves near a dirt road. Inside a lakeside log cabin owned by Dean's family, police discovered another plywood torture board, rolls of plastic sheeting, shovels, and a sack of lime. On August 9th, authorities uncovered 9 additional bodies in Dean Corll's boat shed. These remains were unearthed between 12:05 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. and all showed significant decomposition. One of the bodies revealed clear signs of sexual mutilation, while another displayed multiple fractured ribs. The discovery of identification cards with the 13th and 14th bodies identified them as Donald and Jerry Waldrop. Later that evening, David Brooks provided a full confession. He admitted to being present at several murders and helping with burials, though he denied directly participating in the killings. David described the torture board Dean used, stating that once victims were restrained on it, their fate was sealed. Witnessing these murders did not seem to disturb him. He noted he had seen such events many times. David also agreed to help the police locate more victims' bodies at High Island Beach. On August 10th, Elmer guided police back to the Lake Sam Rayburn, where 2 more bodies were found, buried close together. Both victims had been tortured and severely beaten, especially around the head. That afternoon, Elmer and David directed police to High Island Beach, where they found 2 more shallow graves. On August 13th, they revisited High Island Beach, leading to the discovery of 4 more bodies. This brought the total number of known victims to 27, making it the worst serial killing case in the U.S. history at that time. Elmer had initially insisted that there were still 2 bodies in the boat shed and 2 more buried at High Island Beach from 1972. This case set a grim record for serial murders in the U.S., surpassing the 25 victims attributed to Jonah Corana. I'm so bad at names, guys. Juan Corana, who had been arrested in California in 1971. Dean Corll and his accomplices' horrific record was only exceeded in 1978 by John Wayne Gacy, who murdered 33 boys and young men. John admitted that the media coverage of the Houston mass murders influenced his method of restraining and killing his victims. So, yeah. Side note, I didn't realize until starting this podcast that just like we idolize people and look up to people and do research on people that we like famous people or extremely intelligent people. I didn't realize that serial killers also did that. They look at other serial killers to kind of get their technique down, and they look at what they did and their body count, and they're like, "Oh, I want to be like that person." That's who they idolize. And to know that there are people like that out here in the world is wild. Anyway, back back to regularly scheduled programming. Families of Dean's victims were critical of the Houston Police Department. They were frustrated that the police quickly classified the missing boys as runaways, failing to conduct thorough investigations. Families argued that police should have noticed a disturbing pattern in the disappearances of teenage boys from the Heights neighborhood. Some relatives felt that the HPD was dismissive when they insisted that their sons had no reason to run away. Everett Waldrop, whose sons Donald and Jerry disappeared in 1971, said he informed police that an acquaintance had seen Dean burying bodies at his boat shed. The police conducted a superficial search before dismissing the report as a hoax. Waldrop recounted that on one visit to the HPD, the police chief told him, "Why are you down here? You know your boys are runaways." Gregory Malley Winkle's mother also stated, "You don't run away with nothing but a bathing suit and 80 cents. By May 1974, 21 of Dean's victims had been identified. 17 of them had lived in or had strong connections to Houston Heights. 2 more teenagers were identified in 1983 and 1985. Richard had lived in Spring Branch, and Willard Branch lived in Oak Forest District of Houston. On August 13th, the Harris County grand jury got together to review evidence against Elmer and David. The first people to testify were Williams and Curley, who detailed the events of August 7th and 8th, leading up to Dean's death. Another key witness, William Ridinger, shared his harrowing experience with Dean. After more than 6 hours of testimony from various individuals, the jury indicted Elmer on 3 counts of murder and David on 1. Both of them had their bail set at $100,000 each. The district attorney wanted Elmer to undergo psychiatric evaluation to determine if he was fit to stand trial. However, Elmer's lawyers, Charles Melger, argued that this would violate Elmer's constitutional rights. By the end of the grand jury's investigation, Elmer faced indictments for 6 murders, while David was charged with 4. It was decided that Elmer wouldn't be charged with Dean's death, as it was ruled self-defense. Elmer and David faced separate trials for their involvement in the murders. Elmer's trial began on July 1st, 1974, in San Antonio, where he was charged with 6 murders occurring between March of 1972 and July of 1973. The prosecution brought forward numerous witnesses, including Curley and William. William testified about being tied to Dean's torture board and assaulted multiple times before being released. The police also presented Elmer's written confessions, in which he described luring 2 of the victims, Cobble and Jones, to Dean's residence in Pasadena. Elmer recounted that after initial abuse and torture, Cobble and Jones were bound by a wrist and ankle to the same side of Dean's torture board. Dean forced them to fight each other with the grim promise that the survivor would be spared. After hours of forced fighting, Jones was tied to the board and made to watch as Cobble was further assaulted, tortured, and eventually shot to death. Jones then suffered more abuse before being strangled with a Venetian blind cord. Cobble and Jones were killed on July 27, 1973, 2 days after they had been reported missing. The graphic testimony was so disturbing that several victims' parents had to leave the courtroom to collect themselves. Throughout the trial, the state introduced 82 pieces of evidence, including Dean's torture board and one of the boxes used to transport victims. Inside the box, investigators found hair samples from both Corll and Elmer. Following his lawyer's advice, Elmer did not testify in his defense. His attorney, William Gray, cross-examined several prosecution witnesses but did not present any witnesses or experts for the defense. On July 15, 1974, both the prosecution and defense gave their closing arguments. The prosecution pushed for a life imprisonment sentence, while the defense argued for a not guilty verdict. District Attorney Carl Vance, during his closing argument, expressed his regret in not being able to seek the death penalty, describing the case as the most extreme example of man's inhumanity to man I have ever seen. The jury took only 92 minutes to reach a verdict, finding Elmer guilty on all 6 murder charges. The next day, the process to sentence him for the 6 convictions began. And on August 8th, Judge Preston Dial handed down consecutive 99-year sentences for each count, totaling a staggering 594 years behind bars. Elmer was then moved to the Huntsville unit to officially start serving his sentence. Elmer appealed his conviction, arguing that the jury in his first trial hadn't been sequestered, and that his defense team's objections to media presence in the courtroom were ignored. He also claimed that holding the trial in San Antonio was unfair, and in December of 1978, his appeal was successful and he was granted a retrial. The retrial kicked off on June 18, 1979, this time in Corpus Christi, with Elmer once again represented by his defense team. They fought to have Elmer's written statements deemed inadmissible, but the judge ruled otherwise. The retrial lasted 9 days, during which the defense continued to attack the credibility of Elmer's confession, arguing that the evidence pointed more to Dean than to Elmer. On June 27, 1979, the jury deliberated for over 2 hours before reaching the same verdict. Elmer was guilty of 6 murders and received 6 concurrent 99-year sentences. On the other hand, David faced trial on February 27, 1975, indicted for 4 murders committed between December of 1970 and June of 1973. However, he was only charged with the June 1973 murder of 15-year-old William Ray Lawrence. David's defense attorney argued that his client wasn't directly involved in any killings, painting David and Elmer as the main culprits. The assistant district attorney vehemently rejected this defense, asserting that David was deeply involved from the start. The trial wrapped up in less than a week, with the jury taking just 90 minutes to reach a verdict. David was found guilty of Lawrence's murder on March 4th, 1975, and sentenced to life imprisonment. His reaction was stoic, but his wife couldn't hide her tears. David also appealed his sentence, claiming that his confessions were obtained without being informed of his legal rights. However, his appeal was denied in May of 1979. Right now, Elmer's serving His time at the Mark Stiles unit in Jefferson County, Texas. He's had a few shots at parole since 1980, but no dice yet. His next chance isn't going to come around until October of 2025. David, on the other hand, did his time at the Terrell unit near Rosharon, Texas. He passed away from COVID-19 related complications at a hospital in Galveston on May 28th of 2020 at 65 years old. He's buried at Captain Joe Bird Cemetery in Walker County. In June 2008, Dr. Sharon Derrick, a forensic anthropologist, released digital images of Dean's 3 still unidentified victims. They were listed as ML73 3349 and ML73 3356 and ML73 3378. 2 of them were found buried in the boat shed, estimated to have been killed in 1971 or 1972. ML73 3378 was buried at Lake Sam Rayburn, close to Homer Garcia's body, who vanished on July 7th, 1973. Fast forward to October 17th, 2008, and ML73 3349 was identified as Randall Lee Harvey, a Heights teenager who went missing on March 11th, 1971. Sadly, he was shot through the eye. They found him wearing a navy blue jacket, jeans, and laced up boots with a plastic orange pocket comb nearby. Then there's ML 836849, whose scattered remains were discovered on a Jefferson County beach on August 4th, 1983. They believe he's another of Dean's victims. This one was identified on November 11th, 2009 through DNA analysis as Joseph Lyles, a Heights teenager who disappeared on February 1st of 1973. The poor kid's remains were found near plastic sheeting and sections of rope. But here's where it gets wild. On September 13th, 2010, they found out that ML73 3378 was actually Michael Anthony Balch, not what they initially thought. Michael had disappeared en route to a barbershop on July 19th, 1973. He was shot twice in the head, then buried in the boat shed. Now, remember, ML73 3333 initially thought to be Michael Balch. Well, turns out it was Roy Eugene Button, a Heights teenager last seen heading to work at a Houston shoe store on or about August 21st, 1972. His family had always suspected that he was a victim of Dean, and they were right. And there's more. A body they thought was Mark Scott's turned out to be Stephen Kent Sigmund, last seen walking down West 34th Street on July 19th, 1972. Sigmund's mom reported him missing, but the police didn't do much until Elmer brought it up. In the end, the only unidentified victim became known as John Houston Doe, or Swimsuit Boy. Found in an advanced stage of decomposition, likely killed in 1971 or 1972, he was wearing red, white, and blue striped swimming trunks, cowboy boots, a khaki colored t shirt with a peace symbol. They think he might have had spina bifida. Now, all these victims that I just named that they kind of had gotten mixed up, a lot of these victims, when they had identified them, they gave their bodies over to their families so that way their families could bury them. So then, when they came back and realized that some of those bodies were the wrong body, they basically had to go in and tell those families, hey, we are so sorry, but the person that you buried is not your child. In one case, there was a set of brothers who had been murdered both by Dean and buried together, and the family had one of their children, but the other person who they had buried was in fact not their child. So it was just a really big mix up because I mean, honestly, the police probably would have never found any of this information out, and Dean probably would have went on committing murders for years and who knows how long because they weren't even suspecting him of anything. Um he probably would have just went on murdering for who knows how long. Maybe eventually they would have caught up to him and kind of figured it out, but they weren't even aware that there was a serial killer in the area at the time. And all of the boys had disappeared from, well, not all of them, but a good majority of them had disappeared from the Heights area. But yeah, that was probably the saddest part of all of this was the fact that some of those families had received the wrong body and yeah, 42 boys went missing in Houston between 1970 and Dean's demise in 1973. The police faced heat for scaling back the search after hitting a grim milestone, surpassing the record for the most victims held by Joanne Corna. But why stop there? Even after finding the 26th and 27th bodies at High Island Beach, they called off the hunt. Elmer swore that there were two more bodies buried there, but the search was cut short. What secret lay buried in those bones? Former Dean Candy Company workers recalled odd behaviors. Dean digging a lot, claiming to bury spoiled candy to avoid bugs. But was he hiding something darker under the surface? Rumor has it he hoarded clear plastic rolls used to wrap his victims. He also kept coils of nylon cord in the same kind used to bind his victims. Was he planning this all along? Also, whenever the police was searching Dean's, I guess it was like his house, they also found a map of like a forest, and the map seemed to like have places in the forest marked off, but they also chose to just kind of ignore that. No one ever went and searched. So, the truth runs deeper. David hinted that Dean's killing spree might have actually started way back in 1968. Dean's earliest known victims, Glass and Yates, met their fate on December of 1970. But what about before that? David's stories suggest that there could be more victims hidden in the shadows. Then there are those puzzling gaps in the timeline. I mean, no killings for 7 months. Was Dean taking breaks between his horrors? And what about Prather's disappearance? Was he another victim or just a coincidence? In March of 1973, witnesses reported seeing Dean and his crew burying something at Galveston Beach, but the police didn't dig deeper. Then, in 1972 or 1973, a chilling Polaroid surfaces. A blonde teen handcuffed to Dean's torture setup. Who is he? How many more fell prey to Dean's twisted games? One will never know. Whew, that that one was a doozy. Yeah, Dean Corll, real fucked up guy. Anyway, um, make sure that you guys like and subscribe and comment down below if you are wanting to hear about certain serial killers. I will be more than happy to look into them, do a little research, and maybe I'll even deliver it to you. But like I said, don't forget to like, subscribe, and also don't forget to sign up for my email so that way you can be notified right in your inbox when episodes drop, and fun YouTube videos. But thank you so, so much again for coming to the Candyman Part 2, and I cannot wait to see you guys next time. So, until next time, like I always say, stay safe, stay curious, stay suspicious, don't trust strangers. So that's all I got for you guys today. Bye!